Hi everyone, my name is Karthik Lavangu. I am from America's Central GT team. Before we get started, I want to remind the audience that we will take some questions from the audience at the end of this talk. With that out of the way, I'm really excited to introduce our next guest, Nimesh Patel. Nimesh Patel is a stand-up comedian and Emmy-nominated writer who is rising as one of the most in-demand stand-up comedians in the country. He most recently appeared on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon and made his late night debut with uh, Late Night with Seth Meyers a few years ago. His self-released special, Jokes to Get You Through Quarantine, has amassed over 1 million views. He has opened for comedians like Chris Rock and Aziz Ansari. His new special, Thank You China, is now available on YouTube. Uh, his first writing job came after Chris Rock saw him perform stand-up and he hired Nimesh to write for the Oscars. Since then, he has written for SNL, A Little Late with Lily Singh, White House Correspondents' Dinner, and recently he is also like a producer for Full Frontal with Samantha Bee. So with that, please welcome Nimesh Patel.
Hello,
Hi,
Google.
Nimesh.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Here in freezing cold Minneapolis.
Ah,
Last set of shows here on tour for a little while, so excited to get this weekend started, but kicking it off with you guys.
awesome. Really thankful that you took some time and you know decided to do this talk.
Of
I'm sure
course.
this is going to be a great talk. So, like, when we before we get started, like, we'd like to know a little more about you. Um, I know that you started off with the pre-med, then moved to finance, and then ended up in comedy. So, if you could talk a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, born and raised in Jersey. I went to NYU because I didn't want to go to Rutgers.
Okay.
Uh, and I really was gung ho on being a doctor when I started college.
Okay.
And then my junior year, I got a C plus in Orgo, and that was enough. The kids weren't getting their professors fired back then for giving them bad grades, and times were a lot tougher back then. And
Okay.
back in my day, if you got an Orgo C plus, you just drop pre med and decided to become a stand up comedian, and that's basically what it was. But no, I graduated at NYU from a with a finance degree, and
Okay.
all my electives were pre med classes. But I graduated in '08 with a finance degree, and that was probably the first sign that I'd become a comedian because the funniest thing you could do in 2008 was graduate with a finance degree.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
from that point on, like I was underemployed, unemployed. And in 2009, I was just through a moment of introspection, for lack of a better word. I was like, what do I like to do? What am I good at? And I enjoy making people laugh, and I'm good at writing. And I was like, how do I
Yeah.
combine those two things? And I don't know why, but just divine intervention, maybe like in August of 2009, I just got on stage at Stress Factory in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and that was it. And I was like, oh, I had no idea what I was getting into.
Yeah.
Luckily for me, like ignorance was one of those things that really benefited me because I had no idea what the slog was. I had no idea what the path was. I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew that being on stage was fun. And that's a kind of benefit in that there was not a lot of people before me had carved a path because there was no one to tell me, oh, this is going to be quite possibly
Yeah.
the stupidest thing you've ever done for the next like 10 years. But I'm very grateful that I did that.
Yeah.
Obviously, shout out to NYU, my Orgo Chem professor, who I would not be here without today.
Awesome. Did you have the same professor who got fired recently, or
No,
you
no,
had
no,
a
no, no,
different one?
no, no,
Okay.
no,
Okay.
no.
Okay.
I mean that guy was old then.
Okay.
So who knows if he's still around? But he was giving out C pluses like he was mad that
Wow.
he was in a position and that's what did it to him. But I also earned a C plus. I'm not trying to act like I didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I definitely did
Yeah.
not do well in that class. But
That's
um,
awesome. That's awesome. So, as I said, like in the introduction, so Chris Rock saw you doing stand-up. and
Hmm.
he hired you to write for him for Oscars and like so till that point, if you could talk about like from the time you started doing comedy till that one fine day when Rock actually saw you and like, hey,
Yeah.
okay, you're getting your writing gig and you'll be writing for Oscars. Like, how was that whole time
Well,
period?
that was a very ego testing time that I lived through because,
Yeah,
having had a quote unquote pedigree of being a smart kid that went to NYU and graduated with a finance degree, and I always had a chip on my shoulder when it came to proving myself to my peers who became those
yeah,
things, like what finance guys working at BCG or whatever it was. Like, oh man, like I'm also smart. I should be able to do comedy pretty well, and should be
yeah,
able to succeed in it. But up until, yep, even up until now, like it's always been like a entrepreneurial kind of endeavor. But from '09 to 2016 or so, I was working in finance jobs. So I was like an assistant at a
yeah,
hedge fund. I was assistant at a investment bank. I was an assistant and then an analyst and then an associate at a family office. And that was just so I could, pay bills so that I could live in New York, not ask my parents to pay my rent
yeah,
and go to open mics at the end of the day. And
yeah,
then that show that Chris saw me at was a show that myself, my friend Mike Denny, and my friend Michael Che, who you guys may know about, we started together back in 2011. And, comedy is one of these things where you have to create your own opportunities. And one of the ways you go about doing that is you create your own stage time.
yeah,
And, Denny found a spot. I was like, hey, you guys want to help me run this thing? And flash forward to 2015, we had built it from a show that like six people were at to a show where, we were turning people away because it was twice against the fire code, the capacity that we had there.
yeah,
And on that night, I look back at that night thinking, like, what a weird alignment of stars. At the same time, like, what a moment in time for me because it was right off of getting rejected from the Montreal Comedy Festival, which is like this huge comedy festival
yeah,
for a comedian coming up. It's like a nice feather in your cap, like a rite of passage to be named a new face or whatever. And I remember being rejected from that from like the third time, and my ego was so shot that I was like, man, F this. Like, comedy's dumb, and like these people, like this industry is stupid. And
yeah,
then that, like, literally like 2 weeks later, Chris came into the show to see someone else, and it was my show, and I was like, I'm going up. Like the guy I started comedy
yeah,
in my head is here.
yeah,
I'm performing and doing my best. And the crowd was hot that night. The opening comic was hot that night. I did a great job. Obviously, to the point where Chris afterwards told me I was funny, and then 3 months later, he got the Oscars right. This is 2016, not the slap Oscars.
yeah,
This was
yeah,
the
yeah,
Oscars
yeah,
so white Oscars
yeah,
back in 2016, and he got that job, and he got the hosting gig, and then like 2 days later, I got an email saying, "Hey, Chris wants you to write," and it was like, "All right," and then January 2016, I lose my last finance job. February 2016, I'm at the
wow,
Oscars. Like, and it was crazy in how of like an up and down cycle that was because it was like I was literally like on top of the world in my brain of comedy. Chris Rock has just told me I was funny to the point where I'm at the Oscars,
yeah,
in a
yeah,
tuxedo on my 30th birthday. And then like the next night, like after the last award is given out, I'm thinking I'm famous. I'm thinking all these opportunities are coming my way. No, that Monday after the Oscars, I'm eating dollar
yeah,
pizza, hoping I can get on to the comedy
yeah,
store open mic. Like,
yeah,
where's all this fame and
yeah.
fortune and writing gigs? But that was a humbling time for me as well. Like I kind of, in hindsight, I just frame everything through what my ego was going through at the time, and that was one of those like ego checks for sure.
Yeah, that's one thing I like about stand-up comedy. Like, I'm a stand-up comedian as well. So, like, every time I go to a festival or I get a chance to go perform at a club, whether in New York or somewhere else, I'm like, yes,
Mm-hmm.
something's happening. And then it's the same thing. Like, again, I'm like, okay, I need like $7 to do an open mic. Go get it
Yeah,
through. And then like it's like and even New York is such a city where it just like, humbles you not yet.
every
Like
night,
it's just like
every night, and that's the thing. But that's just the thing of like of at least starting out as a comedian. It was like my expectations were so high
yeah,
because of my view of who I was as a person at all. I'm sure your Google people are like, at least to some extent, consider themselves fairly intelligent. So when you push yourself in that world that
yeah,
way, like, and then that expectation of what you think you're going to be able to achieve doesn't match the reality of it. It's like, did I mess up? Like, what happened? What am I doing wrong? And it's that constant like battle of Sisyphus. Like you gotta
yeah, yeah.
you gotta be ignorant of the fact that you might just be Sisyphus in this situation.
That's true. So when all this was happening, how was your family reacting to this? Were they supportive? Were they like, what are you doing, Nimesh? Like, how are they reacting?
It wasn't well when I started. It was like, what is comedy? Like
Mm-hmm.
I barely knew what I was doing, so it was very hard for me to explain to my parents what I was doing, and I was also in the mindset of like I was a very poor communicator at the
Yeah.
time with my parents because again, ego wise, I'm like I just graduated from NYU and now I'm like living at their
Yeah.
house a year
Hmm.
after graduating, like being a bum basically. And so when I caught this bug, they were like, "What is this? Do you get paid to do this?" I'm like, "Matter of fact, I pay to do this a lot because open mics are not
Yeah.
free."
Pretty, yeah.
And uh, up until like I don't like until I got a job where I was paying rent and I'd moved to the city, like, and then my parents knew that this was something I was pursuing with some
Hmm.
heart and passion. Once that happened, they kind of got off me to like do
Yeah.
anything but that. But every now and then, I guess when my mom was going through whatever, my dad was going through whatever, they'd be like, "So you're gonna get an MBA or what are you gonna be doing?" I'm just like, "Nah, that's
Yeah.
not in the plans." It's just I don't know what I'm doing. Who knows? I got hope and enough for this open mic these times. And I remember in 2011 was probably the first time I ever used YouTube. Like
Wow. Okay.
uh,
To upload a
I put
video?
a I what's that?
To upload a video of your stand-up?
I uploaded a video of my like one of my first sets at a Gotham Comedy Club bringers show. Bringers
Oh,
show being where
okay.
you got to bring people to come see you. And again, like I watched that video sometimes like once, and I was like, man, that was bad. What was I doing? But
Yeah. Yeah.
at the time, I was like, man, this is hot. I crushed. I did so
Yeah.
well, and like this material is good. And I put it up, and I don't know how many views it got, but a few thousand at the time. And I was like, nah, I gotta pull this. I gotta pull this down. Like I don't know what everyone's saying. No, then they won't use that for if you get Comedy Central, you won't be allowed to use that. And when you're starting out as a comedian, you're so precious with your own material. When in reality, it's you're going to be prolific. That's
Yeah.
kind of the goal, or one of at least my goals is to create as much as I can, good stuff as I can, and so throwing stuff away, like putting stuff out there, it didn't even hit me as something I should be doing. And now, fast forward to 11 years later, it's literally how I made my stand up career.
That's awesome. So, who are your comedic inspirations? Like Chris Rock is one. Uh,
Rock is
Another.
one from like the famous people level. It's like probably Rock because
Hmm.
he's the first person I ever saw. Patrice because I think he's a master of
Yeah.
the most underrated master, but he's not underrated. He's like everyone who knows comedy
Yeah.
knows Patrice is the
Yeah.
goat. Dave, I think Dave's probably the most creative person there is um, in like a lot of facets. And then from not famous perspective, it's like my cousins are super fun. Like everyone I think
Yeah.
back, I'm like everyone I grew up around is hilarious in their own kind of way, and I don't know if that's just
Yeah.
my sense of humor or like my family's, but everyone was just funny. Not everyone's like joke writing funny, or they're not always
Yeah.
like, but everyone's
That's
funny.
sarcasm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like everyone's got it in them, and that I always, again, like once you get out of your own ego, you're like, oh, that's pretty fun. Like you can understand why people are funny and how they've impacted you. But yeah,
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah,
that's an easy answer.
that's awesome. So like
Yeah.
I'll tell you like how I came to know about you. So like I was at work one day and that was like this was back in 2016, 2015, I guess. And one of my coworkers comes to me and he knew that I was doing comedy in the evenings. And he was like, "Did you see this Indian guy on Seth Meyers?" And I
Hmm.
was like, "Indian guy on Seth Meyers?" And he's like, "His voice though, man." And he just walked away. He was like, "I'm running." And then I was like, I didn't know what it meant, right? So then I was like, you on YouTube and like Indian guy on Seth Meyers. And I was like, why did he mention his voice? Right. Like, and I'm like, I started reading the comments, like even before watching the video, right? And
Yeah.
everyone was like commenting about the voice and this and that. And then I watched the video and I'm like, you know what? The thing he says about his mom and like Google searches and everything, it makes so much sense, at least as a person who was born and raised in India. Like
Uh-huh.
when I told my dad I was doing stand-up comedy, he was like, I didn't know you were funny. That's what he said. Like I was like, so
Standard dad response.
yep, yep. So but then after I've seen the video a few times, then I realized that maybe the voice he meant was not like the fit like the voice, but your comedic voice. Like I'm guessing like that's what he meant. So like
I hope
how
so.
did yeah, I mean, like that's what I'm like because like again, like I never had a chance to like talk to him or like we never spoke about it, but like how did that come about? Because I see you perform, it is different. It's different and it's super funny.
Thank you.
So how
Uh,
did
I
that
wish
happen?
I had an answer that was cohesive and insightful. Really, like I have no idea. I
Okay.
think like I'm a mishmash of the voices of my dad, who's pretty stoic, my mom, who's pretty snarky, my sister, who is the same, like my cousins, who are a variety of different comedic voices. And one thing I give myself credit for is that, and for better for worse, is that like I'm not a student of comedy.
Hmm. Okay.
Like I have influences, Chris, Patrice, Dave to a lesser extent, but beyond that, I never like you'll meet comics who are like, oh, I knew I want to be a comic since I was 5 years old. Like I know every bit George Carlin's ever
Yeah.
done. Like I could do
Yeah.
Richard Pryor backwards. I'm like I only got into knowing about these people like afterwards, and
Yeah.
even then it was like uh, uh, very tangential because I know how my brain works, and my brain is a sponge in the sense that I'm like if I remember I spent 3 4 days in New Orleans, and by that fourth day I was saying bruh and was
Yeah.
talking. I was from New Orleans,
Yeah.
and so uh, my comedic voice, I didn't want it to be impacted by anybody outside of just my own thought processes. And for better or for worse, that's probably what's created this. And I'm sure you'll see hints of early on. I remember people being like, "Oh, you sound like Mitch," and I was like, "Oh yeah, I've been watching a lot of Mitch."
Mm.
Or you sound like Hannibal. I was like, "Yeah, I was watching a lot of Hannibal because Hannibal was around, and I would go to his show all the time." And as that came to impact my brain, I was like, "Okay, I know what's going on. Like, I'm just listening to these people too much. I got to stop doing that entirely." If I were to spend like a month studying Chris, like
Yeah.
I would have his cadence, And so it
Yeah.
just took a
Yeah.
second for me to like dissolve myself of that and uh, uh, just create it on my own. And hopefully that's kind of shining through. And I think it'll take a little while uh, uh, longer for me to continue to cultivate it, but it is a process I enjoy, and I think I'm coming along in that regard.
That's awesome. I think
But
that's
this
I
physical
believe
voice, that's all.
yeah.
That's all DMX and Newports, man. I'm kidding. Don't smoke Newports. Do not smoke
Yeah.
Newports.
Wait, didn't they ban them or something? Uh, yeah. So I feel like, in my opinion, like that could be like one of the reasons why like you get the kind of love you get online on TikTok, when you do. How did that happen? Like, was there like a point when you decided, you know what, I should start posting stuff on TikTok? Like, how did that happen?
Yes, that's a very clear answer to me. Uh, for me, it was 2019, 2020, 2021 were kind of very pivotal years
Hmm.
in my
Yeah.
attempts at distributing my own material. So, 2016 to 2019 to 2020 and to this day, I'm past at the Comedy Cellar, the best club in New York. And the Cellar would always give the comedian a tape of their set, a
Yeah.
high quality tape of their set.
Yeah.
And I would always take that tape thinking, oh, I'll listen to it or watch it or something. And, they'd say if you're a comic, you should be doing that. And you should be doing that. If you're a comedian
Yeah.
or if you're anyone in the creative field, you should be looking at your work as soon as you can afterward. I never did that, but I just had this kind of archive treasure trove of all my stuff. 2019, July 2019, I tape Jokes for Quarantine. And that wasn't thinking, oh, we're going to go in quarantine. I just taped
Yeah.
it as a comedy special. I was like, okay, I wanted to shop it to some networks. Ultimately, networks passed, obviously. And come March 2020 or so, but before that, I had started putting out little clips from that. And they're
Hmm.
trending
Hmm.
okay on YouTube.
Yeah.
Thank you, YouTube. Come March 2020, I'm like, all right, well, everyone's locked up.
Yeah.
No one's going anywhere. There's
Yeah.
no way I'm going to be able to put this out and sell it anywhere. I got to do something with it. And I had seen the success that Andrew Schultz had had. And I was
Hmm.
like, you know what? Like, that is something to emulate in terms of, and that's when it hit me. I was like, I'm too precious with all this stuff. Like, this is all stuff I don't care about anymore. I should just get rid of it. There's no way anyone else is seeing it because I can't go anywhere. And so I put it out in March of 2020, and I forget when. I should be a bigger student of my own analytics, but I forget when it took off. But the special itself started accelerating in terms of how many people were coming to watch it, how many people were viewing it. And then that summer, I had another clip from the same hour that made a lot of revenue for me on YouTube. And I think it was like it was a political joke, and it just
Yeah.
generated a lot of because I guess like people were spending money on political ads, and anything that's
Yep.
political saw a lot of money. And I was like, oh man, you know what? I'm gonna keep feeding this machine. And I had tons of seller clips, and I started putting those out on YouTube at like a regular pattern. And at the same time, my wife, who works in social media, told me, hey, TikTok is gonna be a thing. You should probably put stuff out on TikTok. And I didn't listen. And then and then a few months later, another friend told me, and I was like, "Oh, okay, you're right." And then like, obviously, my wife deserves a lot of credit, but like I forget when it was exactly, but it was probably around mid 2020, late 2020, where I started really putting stuff up on TikTok,
Yeah.
and to the point where from like November 2020 to like April 2021, I went from like zero followers on TikTok to like 80,000 or something.
Wow.
And to me, I was like, that's a huge acceleration in growth. And I think a lot of it was a lot of people were in India, and like this was before TikTok got banned in India. But
Yeah.
whatever it was, I just got lucky in that early growth kind of stamped me to TikTok and made me go out
Yeah.
there. And I realized I could use TikTok uh, to push sales.
Got
Like I had a lot of dates lined up. Uh, I had a few dates lined up in April in Houston. I was like, let's see if I can't use TikTok to just overlay some text on the video and see what that does.
it. Yes.
And what I ended up noticing anecdotally, I don't know if this is true, maybe in your algorithm machines, you could tell me if this is true or not. But what ended up happening was the algorithm ended up reading what I was typing on the text, and
Yeah.
it seemed like everyone in the comments was from the place that I had mentioned in the text. So in my head, it
Ah,
seemed like, okay, this algorithm is delivering this to this place. That means if
got
I
it.
have shows in that place, I can sell tickets in that place because TikTok is delivering it location specific. And I went from April, almost no shows to, selling out everywhere I came to. And it was just like, and again, like I said, I had years of material to
Yeah.
just put up and chop up. And for the longest time, I was doing it all myself. And then it became too tedious and too time consuming. It was so time consuming because it was so tedious that I hired a team to help me, take the next step and chop everything up and put everything out now. But for the first like 6, 7 months, it was just me. Like I had an editor who knew my ear and knew my voice and just would chop clips up. But then I would download, text, copy,
Yeah.
distribute to Instagram, distribute to TikTok, and it was just like TikTok just accelerated my growth. And that's why I named the special "Thank You China" because
Yeah. Yeah.
if not for TikTok, I don't know where I would be.
Yeah.
And YouTube saw some returns on like the special and stuff, but it wasn't tangible. There was no way to immediately hit somebody like, "Hey, I'm coming to your city," and then consistently beat that drum. TikTok allowed me to do that, and continues to allow me to do that. And now there's your competitors. There's Reels and there's YouTube Shorts, which again like are great syndication platforms. I do the same thing on those two platforms as well. Um, but I always make it a point to ask at every show, like, "Yo, where are you guys from? How'd you guys hear about the show?"
Yeah.
Majority is still TikTok,
Wow.
and it's trending towards like Facebook and Instagram and YouTube Shorts because I know my YouTube Shorts are trending well as well. But it's like the game is still so far ahead on TikTok. It's like I got 1.2 million on TikTok. I got 200 something thousand on YouTube and like 170,000 on Instagram. So it's just a matter of like reaching parity on all those. But the ability for that technological platform to like literally turn, I could translate how many tickets I'm going to sell almost. If I'm sure if I got granular, I could probably get pretty close. But it's like I can use Linktree to see how many clicks came from TikTok, and then if the show sells out or how many tickets I sold in that day or whatever. Like I don't get that granular, but I could. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Got it.
that was really it. It was that those 2 years or so where it was like I saw
Yeah.
the impact technology would have on my career, and it's had a huge impact. Again, like I had nothing, literally nothing. 2020
Yeah, because
April,
you're
March 2021, no
yeah.
dates, no tour, no ticket sales, no just
Yeah.
I would continue to hope to pray, collect unemployment or something, and then
Yeah.
uh, you know, I just sold out. Warner Theater in November. I got
Wow.
5 out of 6 sold out shows this weekend in Minneapolis. Like who's in
That's awesome.
Minneapolis? Apparently, a lot of people.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, like going forward, like how do you see the role of technology in bringing different diverse comedic voices to different parts of the world? Like, because I feel like comedy is like that one thing where sometimes even if you don't really understand the nuances of the language, it's still, like you see people laughing, there is something inside you that also like makes you laugh. Like, you're like, you feel like you're part of that. What do you think like technology or like tech companies can do in terms of building better products or services wise that might bring people more closer, like make conversations more civil. It's not like you're this, I'm this kind of thing, bridging the
With
gaps.
comedy, I think like what would be ideal, and I know this is an impossible ask, but what would be ideal would be something that I feel like advertisers get easily, which is access to delivering something to a specific group, right? Like say I have jokes about Durban in South Africa,
Hmm.
right? Like I wish there were a way to guarantee that the people in Durban, South Africa knew that I was making jokes about them so that I could send
Okay.
that, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like
yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like the algorithm, at least on TikTok, I kind of think it and have uh, uh, anecdotal evidence to believe that that is what's happening. But a product that let me, I mean, I'm sure this product definitely exists, right? Otherwise, advertisers wouldn't demand like what the data is and demand geolocations and all that kind of stuff. But from a creator's perspective, like that would be an ideal thing. Uh, I think, it's very clear what technology is doing to comedy in general, which is democratizing the ability to distribute it. From a creator's
Correct. Yeah.
perspective, from a creator's perspective, it's beautiful in that it's the art it's finding people I didn't even know would want to find it. What's always astonishing to me is going to a show in Tacoma, Washington, and having a 68-year-old white lady and her Native American husband there. Like, we saw you on Reels. I'm like, wait, you're retired and you're on Reels? Okay, cool. Like, it's beautiful to see that. The drawback is that there's a lot of chaff now. There's a lot of people. Democracy has its pitfalls, and that a
Yeah.
lot of people, everyone gets to do whatever they want to do, and not everyone necessarily needs an audience. And
Yeah.
so
Sure.
that's a gift and the curse. That's the double-edged sword we kind of play with when it comes to the various platforms. I I can't see it. I don't know. I can't see it making it. I can't see it making comedy redundant or what's the word, obsolete, because there's just so
Hmm.
much of it out there now. I mean, like, just a cursory search of YouTube specials, it's like an infinite number.
Yeah.
Like, so many people have it, which is great in that it's a beautiful sign of people's hopes. And I hope the best for all of them. My special, it's Thank You China, is still only at like 700 some thousand views or something, which to me is lagging, but that is what it is. But like, the idea of everyone being able to shoot their shot is pretty cool to me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you've written for SNL, uh, Little Late with Lily Singh, and you
Hmm.
produce it for like Full Frontal with Samantha Bee. So do you ever see a situation where you would be a showrunner, like you like make your own, create your own show? Like has some like do we see that
Uh,
happening anytime?
100%. I mean, look, if Google or YouTube want to give me a late night talk show, I'm happy to enter
Okay.
that conversation. Uh, I think as a stand up, I rank myself pretty high as someone who
Okay.
writes and
Yeah.
creates. I would love to do a late night show. When I was
Okay.
working at Lily, when I was working at Sam B, when I was working at SNL, there were elements from each one of those programs. I was like, man, it would be so much fun to just do this on my own and
Yeah.
have to be in charge of this and to make my vision of what I think this could be a reality. With Lily, it was the freedom to create sketches and say whatever you wanted. With Sam B, it was the ability to obviously, talk to camera and take long form segments on issues, so to speak. And with Update, when I was a writer on Update at SNL, it was just the ability to make jokes about anything. Like, if a news story came across their desk and you could find a joke in it, then that joke at least got written, and then
Yeah.
hopefully got told. But uh, short answer, yes. I would love to do that. It's a goal of mine. If you guys at Google and YouTube want to accelerate that, holla at your boy. I think I look pretty good on camera, and I can tell a joke. So
Awesome. So like if you were to pick like if Fallon, Kimmel, Myers, like all of them decide to quit on the same day, or like
uh-huh.
you know, which one would you pick? Like which show would you pick?
I will pick the Chris Rock show from early 2000s, late 90s. I don't know if you ever watched that show, but there's probably an episode or two that's out on YouTube somewhere. But it used to be on
Okay.
HBO. But that was like, to me, I was fairly young when it was out, but you watch it back now, it's like, oh, that's what I think a talk show could be. It's like just Chris doing
Awesome.
stand up, his version, his like, like right now the the thing with all the late night shows, they all kind of feel the same.
Hmm.
What you're getting is like a very similar voice across all the channels, right? Like Kimmel, Seth, Jimmy, the rest. Like they're all very similar,
Got it.
and they serve their purpose. Seth is like a bit more political. Colbert is obviously very political. Jimmy is can do whatever he wants, and Kimmel does whatever he wants as well. But to me, like what Chris was doing was a perfect embodiment of his actual stand up because he would take his take on things, and then you would get sketches that were like Chris Rock sketches, and it was such a you knew that person's voice so well that it bled through everything from the interview to the from the monologue to the interview and the credits, you know, like and the music artists that came on. Whereas on these other shows, the voice is a bit more diluted. It's more for the audience than it is for the comic, I think. And for me, like Chris is obviously the goat, and to
Hmm.
do a show in that vein would be what I would want to do.
Cool. That's awesome. Like I'll have
Yeah,
to check out that show.
yeah.
Um,
Again, YouTube. You know, if you got money to throw, I got some ideas.
yeah, awesome. That's awesome. So outside of comedy, what do
Yep.
you do? Like, what do you do to recharge, de-stress?
Shrooms. Every now and then. But on a day to day, it's like I have to make time to do the things that make me good at comedy. So like, you know, all science says that you need to sleep well, so I try to sleep well. All science says you got to work out, so I try to work out. All science says you got to read to encourage your brain to write. And it's like, yes, I got to do all those things. And those end up helping me recharge because the thing I'm most stressed about or focused about, not stressed in like, oh, what's going to happen way, but stressing like, I got to get this stuff done way, is comedy.
Mhm.
So anything I'm doing to like help me quote unquote unwind or whatever is I know ultimately feeding that machine I got going on deep in the back of my brain, which tells me I got to be doing stand up or I got to be doing something comedic. Like I'm getting into a habit now of trying to watch a movie a night and if, because I know that A, that turns my brain off for a little while. It turns off the gear that's thinking about comedy, but I know that turning that gear off that is thinking about comedy ultimately helps turn that gear on that's thinking about comedy, you know? Like
Awesome.
your brain needs to rest. And I try to do anything I can to make that brain rest and make that rest active if I can, whether it be, you know, right now I'm reading a book. Sorry, it's underneath this iPad, keeping this iPad afloat. But,
Yeah,
you know, just like anything and everything that people say to do to recharge, whether it be workout or dance or drugs or whatever I do. So
that's awesome. So, like, you've been touring a lot. Like,
I have been touring a lot too much.
does it get to a stage where like you feel like that starts taking a toll on you and like the other things in your life, other commitments and stuff? Does it feel like, man, there's like too much, I'm doing too much comedy? Do you feel that?
Yes and no. Uh, yes, in the sense that, you know, traveling, being away from family and friends is always taxing. And I learned not too long ago the value of those things.
Okay.
Um, Not too long ago, but also too long ago, that I learned the value of those things. Like it was being away from them always kills me. Uh,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it's like this is what I set out to do. This is what I'm doing, and nothing comes without sacrifice. And so, like, I got to keep that in my brain, kind of like, oh, this I got to be doing this. I got to be working this hard. And the instant I step away, like if I was on vacation in November for like 2 weeks, and by that end of that second week, I was like, all right, time to go back on stage. Like I need it. Like it's like a
Yeah.
bug that you feel.
Yeah.
And so like I hope that never goes away. But again, like larger point being that I know that there's some things you have to step away from in order to service those things. And so like with stand up is one of those things. Like I know I'll have to step away at some point just to be able to have the juices in my brain reset and reflow. Like I've been so focused on this hour long set I got going on right now that I can't really focus. I can't really think about anything else. And so I know once I step away from that, it'll start helping me turn the gears, all the gears in my brain. I can start thinking about other stuff, and then that'll slowly turn into more stand up. That I've only strengthened that muscle in the last 2 years, and uh, that can't be a bad thing. That I know that
Yeah,
that's for the better. So
awesome. That's awesome. So I think I'll pause here now and take some questions from the audience. Let's see. Let's see the first question. Okay, Jeff asks, does TikTok short form video impact how stand-up comedians structure their sets, jokes?
great question, Jeff. The answer for me is no. When I'm doing my like the stuff I put out on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, those are just like a lot of it's been crowd work and a lot of it's been like one-off jokes that I've told during a set because I wrote a joke and I was like, let me get rid of it. I like it. It's funny. Let me put it out. Uh, uh, and so it impacts in that sense. But I know for other comedians, I'm sure like there's tons of comedians. Like I've even thought about, okay, maybe I'll just record like 60 minutes of 1 minute jokes to camera while I'm on stage because I know that they don't go into the longer hour long set, but they would make great marketing material.
Yeah,
TikTok and YouTube and Instagram are ultimately just marketing tools for the live show. And if I can create marketing material that isn't revealed in the live program, that's just added. That's great because that means people are going to hear some stuff they never heard before, and they've come in off the strength of something that I didn't really care about, or didn't care enough to integrate into like a full hour long set. Uh, so yeah, yes and no, Jeff. Sorry, not give you a yes or no answer, and that's the answer is yes and no. I don't necessarily, but there's definitely comedians that do, and I might at some point in the near future. It impacts. It's all marketing, so.
let's take the next one. Michael Romanek asks, what is your favorite joke, bit, sketch that you wish you wrote?
That I wish I wrote. I mean, joke bits and sketches are all well. Jokes and bits are kind of the same, but sketch. The favorite. I mean, my favorite sketch that I wish I wrote uh, is probably Player Haters Ball, Dave Chappelle. But you know, that's only a sketch that Dave and Neil could have wrote. Like it's if you haven't
Yeah.
seen it, turn this off. Go to YouTube and to Player Haters Ball. It's the funniest sketch ever. Um, Favorite joke. God, that's tough. I mean, my favorite, probably my favorite joke that got me to stand up and was off of Bigger and Blacker. The opening lines like I got on the elevator. Chris Rock says I got. This is right after Columbine. I was at my hotel. I got on the elevator. Two high school white boys tried to get on with me, and I just dove off. Like y'all ain't killing me. Like that is like the perfect way to say that you're afraid of young white boys. Like Chris done it so perfect. I wish I wrote that. You know, granted, I might have had been around at a time when I might have been doing stand up at a time when that was the huge thing. But that's one of my favorite bits. That opening line to bigger, that opening bit to Bigger and Blacker, and that joke in particular is just so perfectly visual, so perfectly topical, and yet sadly timeless.
Awesome. Uh, let's see the next question. Gauri Kuadekar asks, do you feel like comedy translates differently live versus online? What are the differences you've noticed, if any, and does it affect how you curate your jokes, comedy content?
Corey, this is a softball. Obviously, comedy translates very differently live versus online. Uh, uh, you know, there's something that intangible thing, the je ne sais quoi of being in a live audience. That's so like you don't laugh as hard when you're watching a movie alone as you do if you're watching it in a crowd. Like if you watch Superbad alone, it's fantastic. But if you watch it in a crowd, remember when that came out, like you were dying of laughter. That laughter is a social thing, and the more people are around and enjoying it with you, like the more connected you feel to that material that's being delivered to you. I forget what the second part of that question was.
Uh,
What was it?
what are the differences you've noticed, if any, and does it affect how you curate your jokes, comedy content?
Oh, hold on. I think I just okay. There we go. And it doesn't affect how you curate your jokes and comedy content. I mean, yeah, beyond like it doesn't the thing that translates more online for whatever reason, at least for me, has been um, crowd work, and I think
Hmm.
that's because people like appreciate they can appreciate more the quickness with which something is reacted to. And so like the stuff I put out online tends to be more crowd work, A, because it's stuff that's throwaway and it doesn't really matter to me, but also because people connect to it the most. And it's odd that I guess live too that uh, people connect to crowd work. Like I can notice bigger laughs in crowd work, but again, that you're just hitting that like expectation nerve, you know?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
hope that answers the question. Karthik, tell me if I did answer the question. I
I
feel
think
like I
so. I
rambled
think
towards the end
so.
there, but
Yeah, I think so. While we were talking about the content, like I just wanted to quickly ask, what are your thoughts on like AI writing jokes? Like I read somewhere recently that like AI wrote like an episode of Seinfeld recently. So like,
uh-huh.
what are your thoughts on AI writing comedy material? And like, would you ever use a material like let's say, you know, that way?
Uh, no, I wouldn't use any AI generated material unless it was clear that I had used AI to generate something ridiculous. But I know about AI writing material and I've seen it happen. And I know there's some programs that are like pretty advanced in terms of writing stuff. And it
Yeah.
is, I don't think AI could ever fully write jokes. Maybe they can, I don't know. But I remember there's an AI program, I forget what it's called, but you can put in like a scenario and it'll beat out different advanced things that could happen afterwards. And I don't know what's that's
Wow.
based on and what data sets went into creating that AI, but it is fascinating to see what comes out of it. And I think this if if I were to utilize AI, or if any comedians or anyone in the creative field was to utilize AI, is to spark ideas in your own brain.
Mm.
It's like, oh, okay, like this is where this computer thought this was going. Like, that's an interesting vein. Let me see what else. Maybe that sparks the AI in my brain. I can think of something. Um, it is terrifying that if that South Park joke robot comes to fruition,
Yeah.
that would be pretty interesting. And maybe who knows? I don't know. You guys are smarter than I in terms of where AI is going. Um, and I hope AI never gets to write a proper joke, but I welcome it.
Yeah.
I welcome the challenge. I'll fight any robot.
Yeah. I think it's better if we approach it more like, like improving your chess game or playing against a computer to
Mhm.
up your skill. Okay, let's take a few more
Yeah,
questions.
as an adversary.
Yeah, yeah. Arbaz asks, as your fan base grows, do you find it harder to get unbiased feedback on new material?
No, you will never. The YouTube comment section is always full of people that hate your guts and are unafraid of telling you that everything you're doing is bad, that you should
Yeah.
quit, that you look stupid, that your shirt selection is bad, that you're sweating too much, that you drink too much water, or you don't drink enough water. There's
Hmm.
never a shortage of negative comments. Um, the, the direct answer to your question is that I've always been kind of cognizant of an audience that's honest versus an audience that just loves me and will laugh at anything I've said. And I always, I always am cognizant of that bias happening because I've seen it with friends and people I've worked with, and always say the same thing. They're always like, "Nah, they just like me." That's
Yeah.
the uh, fame gift that you get sometimes, and but that gift wears off pretty fast. If you get like maybe 10, 20 extra percentage points at the beginning of a set,
Yeah.
and then you got to keep it coming, otherwise they're like, all right, that bias wears off very fast. And I don't think I'm at a point where that bias is all that strong just yet. You know, I'm a lot of people's first comedy show ever.
Yeah.
And so, and a lot of people obviously still don't know who I am. So it's kind of hard to be like, everyone's biased towards me. Like, I think fans will be biased for a little bit, but that wears off very thin. And then again, like if I need an ego check, I just check my YouTube comments. It's like, oh, okay. Thank you, Basement Dweller, for your opinions. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, like when you write new material, so like who is your first audience? Like, is it fellow comedians or your friends outside of comedy world, family?
It's
Who?
me. It's me always.
Okay.
That's probably like that's I like. I think one of my comments I get a lot is dude laughs at his own jokes. It's like well, most of those laughs are very honest.
Yeah.
Uh, I can know when some laughs are like forced or faked or whatever, but for the most part, like I'm genuinely having a good time up there, and it's uh it's because I wrote something so stupid that I get to then say, honest, like I'm always in awe of the fact that I was pre-med finance at NYU and now I get to tell stupid jokes, for money. It's like it's such a stupid, beautiful thing to me, and I'm always laughing at what a cosmic joke that is. That's like I always laugh at that, like in my soul.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, like, but beyond that, the distance between me writing a joke and me being on stage with it has decreased dramatically now that I've been on tour. And so, like, a lot of times, the first audience I'll have is the first show that I have in a weekend. Like, that's like, if I wrote something that I'm excited about, I say within the first 5 minutes, and that's the first time anyone's ever heard it, and a lot of times, likely the last time anyone's ever heard it because it didn't go as well as I thought it would.
Yeah.
But I had to say it, and I get an honest response from the people that come out. Hopefully,
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah.
yeah,
Let's take a couple more questions. Uh,
sure.
let's see. Christina Medrano asks, how could social platforms be improved to better empower you as a comedian and a creator?
How could social platforms be improved to better empower you as a comedian and a creator? I don't know. I mean, that's it's hard for me to fix what's not broken right now,
Hmm.
because the systems that I've used to put me in a position that I'm in right now um, have worked for me. If there's things to improve, they're all on my end in terms of, man, I could probably make the quality of videos higher. I could
Yeah.
caption things better. I could post them at better times and look at analytics a bit deeper. There's probably tons of things I'm not doing on my end that would improve the performance of the platforms I've utilized. I think from a creator's perspective and from a comedian's perspective, it's just like ease of use and ease of distribution is the most important thing. I wish, YouTube and Instagram and TikTok were not competing with each other, and that I didn't have to do the same. My team didn't have to do the same task 3 times a day, 4 times a day. I wish it was easy to just be like, all right, well, we're going to syndicate to one platform and it's going to go to all of them. And I know there's probably apps that do that, like Hootsuite and all those other programs that do that, but to my knowledge, like they're not as easy to use as someone just uploading directly and doing all that. Um, so yeah, but I think from like a user interface perspective,
Yeah.
I think they're all pretty solid. You know, YouTube has it. I mean, TikTok and YouTube and IG all have their little idiosyncrasies and probably could be improved here and there. But for the most part, like even from someone who hasn't done it in a while, but every now and then I'll go back in and be like, oh, okay, this is fairly easy to use. Like if I want to go live stream on YouTube right now, like on my phone, I could very easily. And like
Yeah.
that wasn't the case, a year and a half ago. A year and a half ago was a little harder.
Yeah.
And now it's like I can do it with ease. Like, yeah, I'm sorry to be like, no, everything's perfect. I'm sure there are things that require some improvement, but from my end, like I think those things are again from my end. Like I need to there's things that I need to improve upon to make myself a better user of those things.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I think we have time for like maybe one or two more questions. This, let's see. Okay, CS asks, you elude a lot of confidence in the way you speak. Is this an innate quality? Is this something that you work on? Or is this something that has developed the more successful you have become? Any tips?
I elude a lot of confidence in the way I speak. The word is exude.
Okay.
I'm just messing around.
Okay.
Uh, I don't know, but like I've always been a fairly confident person, but I don't know if that's confidence that comes from some deep seated insecurity. And I'm just
Hmm.
been pretended to be very
Yeah.
confident to knock down to like no, I'm not insecure. I'm actually super confident, and I think that fake it till you make it thing is probably the greatest uh, phrase uh, to to um, to keep in your brain when you're thinking about confidence.
Hmm.
Like one thing I know about people that I've learned in the last, you know, 36 years of existing is that everyone wishes they were more confident. And the
Yeah.
reason confident people succeed is because everyone else's wishes they could be confident. And so the people like that then becomes an aspirational thing. So the instant you become confident, present yourself as confident, you are confident. People see you as confident. Right? And if it was an innate in me, I'm not sure. Maybe I hit puberty and became 6 feet tall, and that kind of had something to do with it. But uh, it's not something I worked on consciously. It's just something that kind of came to be, and it was definitely reinforced by my quote unquote success. I definitely toot my own horn and listen, like, do blare a lot of Drake when I'm feeling down. You know, like listen.
Okay.
That's the answer is listen to Drake and just try to
Okay.
feel like Drake all the time. Just
That
try to
makes
feel
sense.
like Drake at all times, and you'll find that confident key.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I think like that's a great point to end on. And before we end this,
Listen to Drake is a great point to end on. Yes, for sure.
yeah, yeah. Like I have like one last question. When
Go
was the
for it.
last time you had a White Claw?
When the last time I had a White Claw? Yesterday on the train to Poughkeepsie, New York.
Okay, okay, you're still drinking
Metro
White Claw.
North will demand you to will make you drink. Me and my friends, we went to an event, and that Metro North ride to Poughkeepsie, 2 hours north of New York City. Like, if you're not having a White Claw, it's like, what are you doing?
Exactly. So
Yeah.
like, is there anything you want to plug, promote the special?
Please, yes. Well, thank you, Karthik, for inviting me. Thank you, Google, for having me. Again, my special is out on YouTube. It's called Thank You, China. If you guys can tweak your algorithm to get that into 7 million views, that would be great. If you're in New York, I'm doing a show at two shows at Town Hall in New York City, December 17th, which is not too far away. And then if you're in LA, I'll be doing a show January 20th at the Ace Theater, at the Ace Hotel Theater. And if you're in San Francisco, I'll be doing Masonic Hall January 21st. So come see me. If you want to see me elsewhere, findingnimesh.com. Tickets are right there. But otherwise, thank you, China. And thank you, YouTube. Thank you, Google, for having me, guys.
Thanks so much, Nimesh. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.